Welcome to the California Department of Pesticide Regulations Integrated Germ Management course. This free training course was developed by California Department of Pesticide Regulations School and Childcare IPM program staff and meets the Healthy Schools Act training requirement. This course was designed for school staff whose use of pesticides at a school site is limited to antimicrobials such as disinfectants and sanitizers. However, anyone who uses disinfectants and sanitizers can take this course and benefit from learning more about the proper use. For more in-depth information on general integrated pest management practices and other types of pesticides, please check out our other free courses. Product disclaimer. The mention of commercial products, their sources, or their use is not to be construed as either an actual or implied endorsement. Mention is made of one or more representative products, but the Department of Pesticide Regulation does not recognize any product as superior to any other. Whether you're a child care provider, a school teacher, a custodian, a school nurse, or a nutrition services worker, you probably use a certain kind of pesticide every day at your work. Sanitizers and disinfectants are in the category of pesticides called antimicrobial pesticides. We use antimicrobial pesticides to reduce the spread of disease, including ones caused by bacteria, viruses, and fungi. These disease-causing microorganisms are what we commonly call germs. Because we use antimicrobial pesticides every day to keep our schools sanitary, it can be easy to forget that these products need to be treated with as much caution as any other pesticide. Sanitizers and disinfectants are important tools in public health, but we need to use them according to the label to protect ourselves and the children in our care from pesticide injury or illness. This training will guide you on how and where to use different antimicrobial pesticides safely and effectively to reduce the risk of injury or illness from pesticide exposure. This is a strategy we are calling integrated germ management. Anytime we use a sanitizer or disinfectant, we are exposed to a certain amount of that product. If we aren't careful, we could be exposed to too much. We could spill it on ourselves, inhale a dangerous amount, or splash it in our eyes. The consequences of misuse can be as minor as temporary skin irritation or as severe as requiring hospitalization. Using sanitizers and disinfectants as part of our daily routine can lead to us getting too comfortable with them and forgetting to take precautions. Throughout this training, we will provide actual case studies involving the misuse of antimicrobial pesticides. How can you or a child be injured by a sanitizer or disinfectant? Choose one of the options on the screen to see more. If we get a sanitizer or disinfectant on our skin, it could cause a chemical burn or a rash. If we inhale the vapors of a sanitizer or disinfectant, it could cause difficulty breathing. If a sanitizer or disinfectant gets into our eyes, it could cause blindness. Over 1/3 of the pesticide illnesses reported annually to the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, abbreviated DPR, are associated with antimicrobial pesticide use. The majority of these illnesses are due to the products not being used according to the label directions. Since these products are often sold on shelves along with regular cleaning products, it's easy to overlook their potential health hazards. Most reported illnesses are minor, such as temporary eye irritation, a rash on unprotected skin, or temporary respiratory problems from inhaling fumes. However, serious illnesses can also occur. For example, mixing antimicrobial pesticides with other products is dangerous because toxic gases could be released. For instance, mixing bleach and ammonia causes the release of toxic vapors called chloramines. And repeated improper exposure to sanitizers and disinfectants can cause chronic health problems for workers, like asthma. The label of every pesticide registered by DPR and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, abbreviated EPA, is required to list the health hazards from exposure. Some products are listed as corrosive and can cause severe burns to your skin or eyes on contact. Repeated improper exposure to sanitizers and disinfectants can lead to skin sensitization over time. Other pesticide products are harmful or even fatal if swallowed or inhaled. Inhalation can also cause respiratory irritation, leading to coughing and respiratory distress. Long-term respiratory illnesses, like asthma, have been associated with some ingredients found in disinfectants and sanitizers. The California Department of Public Health reports that in California, 40% of adults who currently suffer from asthma claim that their asthma has been either caused or aggravated by the work conditions. Some people are more sensitive to pesticide exposure. A person's age and size can affect how their body reacts when exposed to a pesticide. Antimicrobial pesticide safety is important for more than just workers. It's important for students too. If antimicrobial pesticides are improperly used, children can be exposed to the residue on surfaces or in the air. Children's health can be affected by small amounts of pesticide residue. Exposure to pesticides can be especially harmful to children since they have fewer natural defenses. For instance, their skin is softer and more absorbent, so a chemical burn from a sanitizer or disinfectant could injure them more than an adult. Their bodies and organs are still developing, so they are more sensitive to pesticide exposure. A child's immature lungs can be damaged by inhaling pesticide fumes, possibly triggering long-term effects like asthma. Children are more likely than adults to be exposed to pesticide residue. They spend more time playing on floors and grass where pesticides may have been applied. They crawl on carpets and have full body contact with the floor. They're naturally curious and could come into contact with incorrectly stored pesticides. Young children are more likely to put their hands or toys in their mouths, potentially ingesting anything on those objects. Compared to adults, they breathe at a faster rate, eat and drink more for their size, and have more absorbent skin. If pesticides are used improperly in a child's environment, it increases their risk of health problems. Children's bodies are more vulnerable to health problems associated with pesticide exposure. Their bodies are growing and developing. They are more vulnerable if they inhale corrosive fumes since they have smaller airways. The nervous, immune, digestive, and respiratory systems are still developing, so they are less able to handle the effects of hazardous chemicals. A child's liver, the organ that helps break down toxins, is not fully developed until age 7. Improper exposure to pesticides at a young age can lead to long-term health problems. We need to keep the school environment sanitary, but we also need to reduce the risk of developing health problems from repeated improper exposure to sanitizers and disinfectants. How can we do this? Click on the choices to find out more. By using antimicrobial pesticides only when and where we need them, we can keep exposure to a minimum while maintaining a sanitary learning environment. The words cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting are often used interchangeably, but they actually all mean different things. Cleaning is the act of physically removing dirt from a surface by scrubbing, washing, wiping, and rinsing. You can use a mild soap or detergent and water for cleaning. Sanitizing means to apply a product that reduces germs to safer levels. Sanitizing surfaces destroys enough germs to reduce the risk of becoming ill from contact with those surfaces. Disinfecting means to apply a product that destroys nearly all germs when applied to hard, non-porous surfaces. Disinfecting is a higher level of germ killing. Determine what level of cleanliness is needed in each location. First, identify those high-touch areas where germs are most likely to grow, like dorm. We can keep the school environment sanitary and also reduce our exposure to pesticides by determining the different levels of cleanliness needed, using sanitizers and disinfectants only when and where we need them, knowing what products to use to achieve the desired cleanliness level, and using those products according to their label. Quiz question. Match the process to its definition. The correct answers are cleaning, physically removing dirt from a surface; sanitizing, reducing enough germs on a surface to reduce the risk of becoming ill from contact; disinfecting, destroying nearly all germs on a hard, non-porous surface. We've been talking about sanitizers and disinfectants, which are antimicrobial pesticides. So how do we know if a product is a pesticide? Which of these are pesticides? Click on the images to find out. Insect sprays are pesticides. Weed killers are pesticides. General cleaners, such as window cleaners, do not claim to kill germs. A pesticide is defined as a chemical designed to kill or control pests like weeds, bugs, and germs on inanimate surfaces. An antimicrobial pesticide, like a sanitizer or disinfectant, specifically targets disease-causing microorganism pests or germs. Whenever you use a product intended to disinfect, sanitize, reduce, or prevent the growth of germs on an inanimate surface, you're using an antimicrobial pesticide. For example, when you use disinfectant wipes to kill germs on a surface, you're using an antimicrobial pesticide. When you look at the label, a product intended to be used as a pesticide will have pesticidal claims on the label. A pesticidal claim is a claim saying that the product manages pests or changes the conditions in which they can live. A product marketed as a disinfectant or sanitizer is making a pesticidal claim to inhibit the growth of microorganisms on the surface. Products with pesticidal claims are required to be evaluated and registered by both the EPA and DPR before they can be sold in California. Other examples of pesticidal claims are antibacterial, germicidal, and kills 99.9% of germs. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency registration number will help you identify if your product is a pesticide. You will find the EPA registration number on every registered antimicrobial pesticide label. It is often at the bottom of the label, on the back of the container, or near the UPC. An EPA registration number lets you know that the US EPA and DPR have reviewed the product and determined that data shows the product to be safe and effective if used according to the label. It also lets you know that the pesticidal claims are accurate. Never use a product to disinfect or sanitize if it doesn't have an EPA registration number on the label. A lot of people in schools and childcare facilities use hand sanitizers. Many people ask if hand sanitizers are pesticides covered by the Healthy Schools Act. The answer to that question is no. Antimicrobial pesticides are used to kill microorganisms on inanimate surfaces, while hand sanitizers are used to kill microorganisms on the human body. Because of this, hand sanitizers are regulated under the Food and Drug Administration. You will not find a US EPA registration number on a hand sanitizer because it is not a pesticide. It is legally a topical antiseptic. Since these products are not regulated by the US EPA and DPR, they are not subject to the Healthy Schools Act requirements. How do you decide which process you should use? In a public K-12 school, there is no statewide standard set of requirements for where you must clean, sanitize, or disinfect outside the California Retail Food Code for school cafeterias. Check with your school district and local county health guidelines for their requirements. While many areas will just need cleaning, sanitizing and disinfecting may be required in others. For instance, sanitizing may be required for cafeterias and food preparation areas, and disinfecting may be required for restrooms, shower and locker rooms, science classrooms, home economics rooms, the nurse's office, and some athletic areas. You'll need to disinfect additional surfaces after a bodily fluid incident or during an infectious disease outbreak. California child care licensing regulations specify when and where you must clean, sanitize, or disinfect. Here is a table DPR developed to show the areas in a child care center where it is required to clean, sanitize, or disinfect according to licensing regulations. Some areas are not specified, so if there's no requirement, we've included the Caring for Children CFOC National Health and Safety Performance Standards. The CFOC standards are not enforceable and sometimes exceed California state licensing regulations. Child care facility sanitation requirements are room and process specific. The most detailed requirements are in infant care settings. Both the process and the frequency of use are specified. A copy of this cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting frequency table is available on our website. When you use a sanitizer or disinfectant product, it's important to take the time to read the label thoroughly, even if you've used the product before. The directions may have changed. Let's talk about where you can find important information on a pesticide label. Every pesticide product registered by US EPA in California must have the following information: an ingredient statement, signal word, precautionary statements, first aid statement, directions for use, keep out of reach of children warning, storage and disposal statement, and EPA registration number. Let's talk about what each of these sections tells us. The ingredient statement is where you can find information on what is in the product. The active ingredient is the part of the product that kills or inhibits the pest. The label must list the active ingredient, either the chemical or common name, and give the percentage by weight. The inert or other ingredients make up the rest of the product. The other ingredients can include solvents, emulsifiers, wetting agents, and diluting substances. They do not need to be specified, but their percentage must be listed. Pesticide labels use one of three human hazard signal words: caution, warning, or danger, to show the product's potential for making you sick if it isn't used correctly. The US EPA uses toxicity, eye irritation, and skin irritation test results to put pesticides in these toxicity categories. Caution is the least toxic category. Warning is more toxic than caution, and danger usually means a product is poisonous or corrosive and should be used with extreme care. Some pesticide labels don't have a signal word. These pesticides are less likely to harm you, but you should still handle them carefully. Whatever the signal word, always follow the label instructions to keep yourself and others safe. Any pesticide can be dangerous if not used correctly according to the label. The precautionary statements on a pesticide label will tell you the potential health hazards from exposure to the product and how you can use the product safely. It will tell you about any special precautions you need to take, as well as any extra protections needed for children or pets. For example, you may need to use protective equipment like goggles or gloves when preparing or using the product. If the label states that protective equipment is required, it is because the product can hurt you if it gets on your skin, in your eyes, or in your lungs. This protective equipment is required by law and is meant to protect you from adverse health effects. Let's talk about a real case study involving a school employee not using the required personal protective equipment. A school food service manager dropped a dishwasher sanitizer bottle and splashed sanitizer in her eyes. She was not wearing the required PPE as directed on the label. She had burning eyes, eye pressure, and blurred vision that persisted for 2 months. The first aid statement tells you what steps to take if you get the pesticide product on or in your body. If swallowing or inhaling the product or getting it in your eyes or on your skin could be harmful, the label would give you first aid instructions. The instructions are not a substitute for medical advice or treatment. Always call a doctor or a poison control center for advice if you think pesticides made someone sick. When you call, try to have the pesticide container with you. The directions for use section tells you how to use the pesticide. You should make sure the pest you are trying to control is listed. This is your assurance that you are not wasting time and money on something that won't work. This section also tells you how much to use, where it can be applied, and how to apply it. Always read and follow label directions. Be sure the pesticide is the right one for your pest problem. Then use only the amount needed and no more. If you use a concentrated product, the directions will tell you how to prepare and dilute your antimicrobial pesticide before using it. Many people are injured every year from splashing or spilling sanitizers and disinfectants during the preparation of dilutions. Consult the label for instructions before you begin. We'll go into more details about how to properly prepare dilutions next. First, check for adequate ventilation in an area away from children. You must always prepare and use sanitizers and disinfectants in well-ventilated areas and make sure kids are not nearby. Even if you've used the product before, read the label. Label instructions sometimes change, and products with different concentrations can look very similar. Read the first aid and accidental spill instructions on the label. Be sure you are wearing the appropriate protective equipment, like goggles and gloves, if directed on the label. If the product is a concentrate, select the proper dilution rate for your use. The label will tell you how much to use for sanitizing or for disinfecting. Always use proper measuring tools and don't eyeball it. It's easy to add too much or too little that way. Adding too little can make the product ineffective and not kill the germs you want to kill. Adding more than is directed on the label does not make the product more effective. It unnecessarily increases pesticide exposure and the risk of injury. Prepare only what you need to use in the short term. Some sanitizers and disinfectants lose their effectiveness and require new preparation after a certain amount of time. Check the label for dilution expirations. When you make your dilutions, reduce the risk of spills and splashing by using a cup and funnel for transferring the liquid from the bulk container. And always pour the concentrate into water instead of the other way around. If you add water to a concentrate, the product could splash back at you. Be prepared in case it does spill and have absorbent material, garbage bags, and chemical-resistant gloves on hand. Have the telephone number for the Poison Control Center available in case you have additional questions. A lower risk option to dilute concentrates is to use a dispensing system, also called a dilution station. The dispensing system automatically dilutes the concentrate. Multiple chemical mixing dispenser options are available through custodial suppliers. These dispensers eliminate the need for measuring and contain the concentrated product, so there is a much lower risk of exposure to the concentrate. Let's talk about a real case study involving unsafe diluting. A custodian was splashed in his right eye while preparing a disinfectant solution. He didn't wear the required protective equipment, nor did he follow procedures on filling a bucket with water first before pouring in the powder. His eye was painful and swollen, and he had blurred vision. He missed 2 days of work. A container that holds diluted antimicrobial pesticide is called a secondary container. The U.S. EPA recommends that secondary containers be properly labeled. Unlabeled containers may lead to accidents since people don't know to be careful with the contents. The secondary container label should have the product name, the EPA registration number, the active ingredient name, the signal word, caution, warning, or danger, precautionary statements, and any hazard pictograms present on the label. You can find this information on the product label. Here's an example for a secondary container holding a dilution. The product label has the signal word danger, so it is added to the secondary container label as well. The precautionary statements are corrosive and harmful if swallowed. The pictogram is the sign for a corrosive material. If the label states that a fresh solution must be made daily, add the date and time it was made. That way you will know when it has lost its effectiveness. Never put any pesticide into a food or drink container for any reason. Children or other people can mistake the pesticide as something to eat or drink and be poisoned. Let's talk about a case study involving a pesticide in a drink container. A custodian filled a beverage container with a sanitizer. She labeled it and placed it in the bottom of her work cart. Months later, she reached for iced tea on her cart but grabbed the sanitizer-filled bottle instead. She drank from it and developed mouth and throat irritation and difficulty breathing. Something else that can be dangerous is mixing cleaning and antimicrobial pesticide products. For instance, sodium hypochlorite, the active ingredient in chlorine bleach, reacts with ammonia, drain cleaners, and acids such as vinegar to create toxic gases. These gases can cause serious injuries like skin burning and blistering, severe breathing difficulties, and fluid in the lungs. At very high concentrations, the gases can be lethal. Let's talk about a real case study involving a toxic mixture. A school cafeteria worker mistakenly added a de-limer to a sink with bleach. She and a coworker inhaled the resulting fumes and became ill. Both workers sought medical attention, suffering headache, nausea, throat and chest tightness, abdominal and chest pain, and shortness of breath. Never mix cleaning and antimicrobial pesticide products. Make sure area is well ventilated and away from children. Carefully read the pesticide label. Select the proper dilution rate, and use measuring tools and pour the concentrate slowly into water. Remember, these are just a few parts of proper diluting. Let's talk about what else you can find in the Directions for Use section on a disinfectant or sanitizer label. The Directions for Use will tell you what steps you need to take in order for it to be effective, such as how much to use, whether you need to pre-clean, and the amount of time to keep the product wet on the surface. It's a good idea to clean a surface before sanitizing or disinfecting. Some sanitizers and disinfectants actually require a pre-cleaning step before use. Consult the label to see if this step is required. For these sanitizers or disinfectants to be effective, all dirt and grease must first be removed from the surface. Excess dirt can make some sanitizers and disinfectants less effective. The Directions for Use will also tell you the contact time required to kill the microorganisms listed on the label. Following the correct contact time on the product label is crucial for effective sanitizing and disinfecting. Contact time is the amount of time that the sanitizer or disinfectant must stay on the surface to kill the germs. Some product labels will say let stand for, leave for, or must remain wet for, rather than the words contact time. Be sure to follow those directions carefully because the contact time can vary depending on the product, the process, sanitizing or disinfecting, the use dilution if it requires diluting, and the particular microorganism you want to kill. If you don't follow the contact time, the product will not be effective. For instance, if you don't use enough disinfectant wipes to keep the surface wet for the entire contact time, you may end up just spreading the germs around the surface instead of killing them. You also risk leaving behind just enough pesticide residue to make the remaining germs more resistant to the product. Depending on the product, you might need to let it air dry after application, wipe it off, or rinse it off before touching the surface after application. Check the label for these post-application directions. If you don't wipe or rinse when the label requires it, you could leave behind product residue that is hazardous when it comes into contact with skin. Some antimicrobial pesticides can be used on food contact surfaces, but they may require a water rinse after application to make sure there's no risk of the pesticide residue being ingested. Sanitizers and disinfectants are pesticides, and it is not appropriate to store them where children could access them. All EPA and California registered pesticides are required to have the child hazard warning, keep out of reach of children. Never allow a child to use a pesticide product, including disinfectant wipes. Let's talk about a case study involving a child using disinfecting wipes to clean his desk at school. An elementary school teacher handed out disinfectant wipes for her third grade students to use to wipe down their desks at the end of the day. According to a student's mother, her child developed severe skin irritation on his hands after using the wipes, with red, cracked hands and bleeding. Never allow a child to use a pesticide product, including disinfectant wipes. Some of the ingredients in disinfecting wipes can be irritating to the skin and harmful when inhaled, especially for children since their bodies are more vulnerable to health problems from pesticide exposure. Only allow children to clean with soap and water or a mild detergent. Every EPA-registered pesticide label is required to have a keep out of reach of children warning. This is the law. Keep all pesticides out of the reach of children. If disinfectants and sanitizers are stored in an area accessible to children, there could be dangerous consequences. Every pesticide label must have a storage and disposal statement that tells you how to store and dispose of leftover pesticide in empty containers correctly. Make sure to read and follow the storage and disposal directions on product labels carefully. Sanitizers and disinfectants are usually stored with other cleaning products. This can pose serious safety risks because, as we mentioned, some sanitizers and disinfectants have ingredients that are very reactive with other chemicals. Be careful what other products are stored nearby. Let's talk about a case study involving improper pesticide container storage. A 21-month-old child inhaled fumes from an empty pitcher that had contained an antimicrobial pesticide used to disinfect toys at a daycare center. According to the teacher, the child vomited once and was coughing and gasping for air. Children can be injured by exposure to even empty pesticide containers. Keep all pesticide containers, even empty ones, out of the reach of children. Here are some general recommendations for the safe storage of sanitizers and disinfectants. Store disinfectants and sanitizers in a secure location out of the reach of children, like a locked cabinet or closet. Make sure your storage area is well ventilated and stays cool. Some disinfectants are not shelf stable if stored in a hot area and will lose their effectiveness. Keep containers tightly closed when not in use. People have been injured when a loose lid or cap pops off unexpectedly. Some sanitizers and disinfectants are corrosive and can cause severe eye damage if splashed into your eye. Store sanitizers and disinfectants on shelves below eye level. Store sanitizers and disinfectants in their original containers. Remember, the label has a lot of critical information, so keeping the product in the original container gives you access to that information. Let's talk about another case study involving improper pesticide storage. A school custodian was organizing a janitorial closet. He reached for a bottle of disinfectant on the top shelf, which turned out to be open. It slipped from his hands and splashed onto his shirt and arm. He received a chemical burn from this accidental pesticide exposure. As we mentioned earlier in this training, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency registration number tells you that the product is a pesticide. When you see an EPA registration number on a product sold in California, it lets you know that the U.S. EPA and DPR have reviewed the product and found it to be safe and effective if you follow the directions on the label properly. Don't use any product for disinfecting or sanitizing that doesn't have an EPA registration number. It could be just a cleaning product or even an illegal pesticide product. All sanitizers and disinfectants may pose a risk to your health from repeated improper exposure, especially if the label instructions are not followed carefully. There are some active ingredients that are less likely to have harmful health effects when used in the long term. The U.S. EPA's Design for the Environment program identifies specific active ingredients that are least hazardous and unlikely to cause long-term health problems while still being effective. These ingredients are citric acid, hydrogen peroxide, lactic acid, ethanol, isopropanol, peroxyacetic acid, and sodium bisulfate. If you see the Design for the Environment (DFE) logo, EPA has determined that the product is in the least hazardous acute toxicity classes, is unlikely to have carcinogenic or endocrine disruptor properties, is unlikely to cause developmental, reproductive, mutagenic, or neurotoxicity issues, does not require the use of personal protective equipment, has no unresolved or unreasonable adverse effects reported, and has no unresolved efficacy failures. You can tell a product meets the Design for the Environment standards by looking for the DFE logo. Remember, any pesticide has the potential to cause harm to people or the environment. This is particularly true if the label instructions are not followed precisely. Always follow the instructions on the label. The label is the law. Some materials have natural antimicrobial properties, such as copper and its alloys and silver. There are EPA and California registered products made of these materials that are effective against microorganisms. With regular cleaning and maintenance according to the label directions, surfaces made of these materials retain their germ resistance without the need for chemical pesticides. Before we talk more in depth about the Healthy Schools Act requirements, let's summarize what you've learned about the best practices for using antimicrobial products safely and effectively. Follow the label directions carefully to make sure the product is safe and effective. Carefully consult the label when choosing an antimicrobial product to make sure it is the best choice for your needs. Reduce your exposure by only using disinfectants and sanitizers when and where you need to. Use any required personal protective equipment. Store antimicrobial pesticides safely and out of the reach of children. Never allow children to use pesticides, including disinfectant wipes. Now let's talk about how the use of antimicrobial pesticides fits into the Healthy Schools Act. The Healthy Schools Act is a right-to-know California law enacted in 2000 that requires information be provided to staff and parents when pesticides are used at school sites. The goal of the Healthy Schools Act is to create and maintain a healthy learning environment where children grow and learn. It encourages the adoption and practice of integrated pest management, or IPM. IPM is a strategy that focuses on the long-term prevention of pests or their damage through a combination of techniques, including prevention, inspection, identification, monitoring, and the utilization of least hazardous methods to control pests. There are certain requirements that must be met in order to comply with the Healthy Schools Act. Sanitizers and disinfectants are exempt from most of the requirements, except the annual training we're taking now, since they are needed for health and safety reasons. Other exempt pesticides are those that have a reduced exposure risk, such as self-contained baits and traps, or gels and paste used in cracks and crevices. Products exempt from EPA registration because of their low toxicity are also exempt from most of the Healthy Schools Act requirements, except for the annual training. Since you may also be using other pesticides in your facility, let's go over all the Healthy Schools Act requirements now. School districts and child care centers are required to designate a staff member to serve as the IPM coordinator to ensure that the requirements of the Healthy Schools Act are met. The designated school IPM coordinator will lead by example and educate fellow staff on how they too can promote a healthy environment for children to learn and grow. Each school district or child care center must develop an annual IPM plan, post that plan on the school website, and make it available in the front office. Exempt pesticides, such as antimicrobials, are not required to be on this plan. The IPM coordinator must ensure that this IPM plan is updated and posted or distributed annually. All non-exempt pesticides intended to be applied by either an employee or a contracted pest control business should be included in the plan. If the school site doesn't have a website, they must send out a copy of the IPM plan to parents, guardians, and staff, along with the annual pesticide notification list. Additionally, the school site must maintain a copy in their front office. DPR has developed an IPM plan template that can be found on the DPR website. School sites must ensure that parents, guardians, and staff are provided with an annual notification of the non-exempt pesticide products that the district or the contractor intend to use. This notification can either be posted on the school site website or distributed as written copies. Parents, guardians, and staff must be given the opportunity to be individually notified before each non-exempt pesticide application. Those who signed up to be notified in advance of non-exempt pesticide applications must be notified 72 hours before each application. Additionally, warning signs must be posted 24 hours before a non-exempt pesticide is applied and remain for 72 hours after the application is completed. The sign should be posted around the pesticide treatment area, not just at the entrance to the school site. If a non-exempt pesticide not included in the annual notification must be used, written notification must be given to all parents, guardians, and staff 72 hours in advance. Records of each non-exempt pesticide application must be kept at the school site for 4 years. These records need to be available upon request. You can find templates of these forms on the DPR School IPM website. All non-exempt pesticide applications made by school site staff must be submitted to DPR. Reports must be submitted no later than January 30th for the previous year's applications. School sites are responsible for reporting pesticides used by their staff, including teachers, cafeteria workers, landscape workers, and any other staff who apply non-exempt pesticides. School sites do not have to submit reports for pesticides applied by outside pest management contractors. Pest management contractors are responsible for submitting their own reports. However, it is the school site's responsibility to make sure outside contractors are aware that the property is a school site and falls under the requirements of the Healthy Schools Act. This is true for exempt pesticide applications as well, for instance if you have an outside contractor for custodial services. Here is a copy of the Pesticide Use Reporting Form DPR HSA 118. This form is only used to report pesticides made by school and childcare employees. It should not be confused with Form DPR/ENF 117, which looks similar but is only used by pest management contractors. This form is available on the DPR School IPM website. If you contract for pest management, your licensed pest management professional, or PMP, must also report pesticide use data yearly to DPR no later than January 30th for the previous calendar year's pesticide applications. Reports should include all non-exempt pesticides used at the school site. PMPs must give advance notification of non-exempt pesticide use at least 3 days prior to application at schools and 5 days prior to application at child care centers. Notifications must include product name, manufacturer, U.S. EPA registration number, active ingredient, area treated, date, and the reason for the application. This information is necessary for every application because school sites must keep records of all applications, including those made by PMPs, for 4 years. If you use or intend to use any pesticide on school grounds, you must take an annual Healthy Schools Act training course, such as the course you are taking now. The training must focus on school IPM and the safe use of pesticides in relation to the unique nature of schools and children's health. Check the DPR School IPM website for free training opportunities, which include online courses, in-person workshops, and DPR-approved outside courses that meet the training requirements of the Healthy Schools Act. Again, anyone at a school site who applies to pesticides, including sanitizers and disinfectants, must take a DPR-approved training course before making a pesticide application, and annually thereafter. Sanitizers and disinfectants are important tools in public health. They are used in schools and child care centers to prevent the spread of germs that cause disease, but they need to be used carefully. We hope this course has given you a better understanding of the importance of using sanitizers and disinfectants correctly in your school or child care center in order to reduce the risk of pesticide illnesses and injuries for you and the children in your care. For information on integrated pest management practices for other pests, such as insects, weeds, and rodents, please check out the other free courses available on DPR's School and Child Care IPM website. If you have any questions about the Healthy Schools Act or integrated pest management at school sites, feel free to email the DPR School and Child Care IPM program. We're here to help. You have now completed the DPR Integrated Germ Management course. You may now continue to the final exam.